You are listening to the Leading Detection podcast, and I am Matt, the host, aka the Fraud Recruiter. After a crazy few months, not only with it being peak season in the fraud space, but also as she's often jet setting around, speaking at events and conferences, it's great to be sat down today with Lucie Novotna. Collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. That is what we'll be doubling down on today, not only across the fin crime teams to Framel or not to Framel, across business in general, collaborating with teams like marketing, but more importantly, across the industry. How can we get hold of sharing more critical data points with each other, including from telco and social media? A few controversial topics to get our teeth into. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Leading Detection podcast, and welcome, Lucie. We finally made it happen. It's been a busy few weeks, not for yourself, but everyone in fraud.
Absolutely. And thank you for your patience, and thanks for having me. Really pleased to
No.
be talking about these very important topics today.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And bit of an update, bit of a insight into what's going on, what's changed. It seems like it's changing day to day, right? But what we're going to talk about today is how those threats have evolved and how important collaboration is moving forward in particular. So yeah, a bit of context when we say about these threats evolving. Where do you think the headlines have been that you've seen more recently?
Really, AI-enabled fraud, I think, is the main headline, or that's the biggest change from what we've seen maybe in the previous years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's both in terms of onboarding with forged documents, but it's also in terms of scamming, right? People out of their money. And those are the scams that happen outside of the platforms that are visible to our financial institutions that are responsible for ideally blocking or preventing such fraud. So the AI democratization, the fact that it's super easy to generate documents, videos that are super credible, right, with different faces and forged identities, I think has been the biggest topic and the biggest kind of seismic change in how we do things.
Most people would probably jump to volume, right? The volume of fraud is the issue. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. It doesn't seem to be that case. It seems to be a lot more on the sophistication side as opposed to the volume side.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. And it differs slightly by the institution, right? And the type of products that you offer, the demography that you're targeting. I think there's both sides of the spectrum. So there's a lot of really high frequency but very low value fraud. The marketplace fraud, the forged tickets to Oasis concerts and stuff like that.
I was there.
Yeah, fantastic. Hopefully with a real ticket. But there's also a lot of lower frequency but super high value fraud. So those are the investment scams and romance scams that take a long amount of time, a lot of this grooming of the victims, etc. So depending on who you service with your financial products and what they're susceptible to, we really see both things. So I wouldn't just say it's, point blank, an expansion of fraud. There is an epidemic, but it's still coming from both sides of the spectrum. So some of it takes a long time, evolves over months, but that means you get some, the somebody's life savings essentially. So both types.
Yeah. Do you think it's because it's such a longer game that fraudsters get a bit impatient and they can realize that they're working out the systems? So lower value, more frequent is the way to go because there's a lot of effort into the longer term scams. What do you think it's triggered it on the criminal side?
Yeah, I think a bit of both really, because it's become an industry of its own. Big players and there's small players, right? There's entire kind of fraud farms of people, often unfortunately, who are trafficked into these situations as well. So there's that layer of that. But there's entire professional organizations that do this. And there's also kind of the lonely, smaller fraudsters that might be, forging that odd ticket or so, or selling stolen bikes on marketplace. But it's really the entire spectrum of professionalism, of organization, and of an industry that is almost, I'd like to say, mature even.
Yeah. Do you think it's also that on first party fraud as well, it's that kind of lack of human interaction because we have become so technology focused? If you went 20 years ago and you were to commit fraud with your local store, it'd be really difficult, right? You'd have to face them and tell a lie to them. Whereas now it's a lot easier. Technology making the process easier on one side, is that kind of allowing fraud to be carried out more often and easier?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's totally part of the theme. Um, you can also scale it up really easy,
Mm,
right? Send the exact same video to 1,000 people, asking them for help, and that could be pretending to be a charity, an NGO, etc. It could be in the
mhm,
context of romance scams. So the way the technology works is yeah, allows you to do it safely as well. You can
yeah,
be sitting in Bali, sipping a pina colada or something, and scamming people while at it.
yeah,
You don't need to be in the trenches to do this anymore.
No.
You can scale it up indefinitely.
And technology as a sector, where are we putting things in place to we've set the context now.
Mm.
So crime fraud is on the rise across the board. So what kind of technology barriers are we putting in place to prevent this?
Mm. So, if I talk from the perspective of somebody who's trying to prevent or detect it, at least
mhm,
respectively, it's really about the context and the understanding and the analysis.
mhm,
Um, so, the technological controls that we're putting into place are really about harnessing the different data that we have
mhm,
and making sure that we analyze it properly. So, get the most intelligence or context out of that data.
Yeah.
We, as you mentioned, we've alluded to how digital this day and age is.
mm,
That means we have data points about every single action that we take, right? When I pick up my phone, I unlock it.
yeah,
To put it simply, an audit log of how I did that. Did I do it by typing in the password, or did I
mhm,
do it with my face, fingerprint, etc.? That same is true to even a higher extent with our financial activity. So
mhm,
me logging into online banking, making any kind of activity, changing my contact details, etc. All of that creates a really granular audit log of data points.
yeah,
And all of these can be used in a way to understand the context better and detect when something suspicious is happening, right? Both
mhm,
on the fraudster and on the victim side of things. So it's really about harnessing the data, understanding what it is
yeah,
that the institution is collecting about these behaviors, about your customers, etc., about their counterparties,
mhm.
ensuring that you are able to leverage it properly and ensuring that you're using analytical tools that allow you to ask the right questions of the data.
So fraud's a data problem, effectively. Are we collecting enough data, or are we not making use of the data that we've already got?
I think both, really. And there's a third element that I'd like to mention, and it's really about the different industry players, right?
Mhm,
So, as a provider of financial products, whether that's on the lender, on the banking side, or payments on the side of payments institutions, there's
mm,
only as much visibility as you can realistically have about your
Yeah.
customers. And whether you are or are not collecting enough data is one thing. The second part is, are you using it effectively? The fact that you have that data point doesn't mean you are able to plug it into your anti-fraud controls or
mhm,
transaction monitoring systems. Um, but the third part is about the visibility. With the scams that happen, they happen on Instagram and Facebook and other social media platforms. They happen on the phones. So there's different parts of the ecosystem, not regulated the same way as
mhm,
financial institutions, that are almost equally responsible to do something about these things, right? Telco companies. That's super easy to switch SIM cards. All of these things, the fact that you can track IP addresses and understand where the fraud is coming from, where there's a higher concentration of fraud, etc. Need to expand the responsibility, not just in terms of we need to collect more data points, we need to leverage them in a more
yeah,
efficient way, but we alluded to the need for collaboration. There's different players in the ecosystem that have really important visibility into some of these activities that
mhm.
are determinative of fraud or not.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about different because, like, telco, did they even really want to be involved? I don't know if they were part of the one-time password when you text it, and they kind of got chucked under the bus with fraud, right? They're entered a space that they didn't really want to be or didn't plan to be in, and now they're a big player, right? And they need to start taking on some responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And um, it's the never-ending story, right? And it's a bit of a clash between privacy and security. That's
Mhm,
always a conversation that will never, I think, cease to exist. Um, And it's the same with how much do we regulate, and I suppose neither of us really wants a big brother government or anything like that. But if we find the balance, it's a balancing act really about finding the right collaboration and imposing the right responsibility and accountability on these players.
Mm.
With Go, of course, it's not a new topic, right? We've been sci-fast, etc. We've been discussing um, ways of collaborating in the market, making sure that we can leverage some of the really important intel.
Yeah.
Also, different jurisdictions have different controls about who can actually have a phone number, right? How much information or KYC in other ways
Yeah.
uh, do you need to kind of conduct before you give somebody a SIM card?
Yeah.
But I personally, when I travel and I'm there for more than a week, I'll get a e-card, right?
Yep.
eSIM to be able to use the data and not bankrupt my entire family by data fraud.
Yeah.
So it's the balancing between we need to make consumers' lives easier and make it completely, kind of streamlined and
Mm.
effective for people to use these services, be it financial products or telco products, needs to be balanced with where are we really enabling fraud by doing this way? And where are we willing to make that threshold or the cut off? We need to make somebody's life a tiny bit more difficult
Mm.
and create some friction in order to prevent all of these things from happening.
There's quite a big pushback, right? So from the social media companies, from the telco companies, it's not our responsibility kind of situation. So do you think there needs to be a regulatory pressure, but is it from the consumer side as well? Is there much pressure there when it comes to fraud?
Yeah, I don't really have a right answer for you. I think
Yeah.
that's why we're having a discussion. That's why we find it remotely interesting, I suppose, because there's no clear answers. If we had
Yeah.
them, uh, I'd like to think we'd act on them. But it's a bit of both, right? And I sit on kind of the both EU and UK spaces in terms of the clients that we as a company service. So
Hmm.
have a bit of a visibility into both regulatory environments and what that means for business, what that means for regulated institutions, etc. And I think there's quite interesting differences even across the EU, right? Um, there's regulators that are innovative and they expect you to lean into that.
Mm.
CA being one of them.
Yeah.
They're essentially saying we're principle driven. We expect you to do your best. If these innovations and collaborative, data or intel sharing initiatives exist, we expect you to lean into it and do
Yeah.
your best in leveraging them to, achieve the things that we expect you to focus on: consumer trust, prevention of financial crime, etc.
Hmm.
In different jurisdictions with different regulators, institutions tend to be more conservative because unless it's prescriptive in the law or in the
Yeah.
interpretation of the directives in the EU, they will be worried about setting a foot wrong and being too innovative without especially the infrastructure such as sandboxes, etc., where you can do
Mm.
stuff safely, test
Yeah.
it out, get the stamp of approval. So that's where the regulation is years behind where it needs to be right now in order to incentivize, and not just with the carrot but also with the stick, the innovative things that we need to do, be it use of data, be it use of AI for
Mm.
transaction monitoring or fraud controls,
Yeah.
or be it collaborations and data sharing. And of course, there's just this institutional pride almost, right? GDPR regulators have an important job to do,
Yeah.
and they will wake up every day and try to make sure that they do it well, which is the correct approach, of
Hmm.
course. But we need to find a way where there's a Venn diagram in our almost interests of
Yeah.
monitoring and security and privacy. So yeah, very big ongoing themes, and I don't have an answer to where the threshold really is. But
Yeah.
regulatory setting is super important. Technological infrastructure for allowing companies to try test new things and innovate, like the
Hmm.
sandbox that I mentioned, are super important. And without that, we can't expect the private sector to be too bold or creative if they're worried about being fined or
Mm.
even losing licenses, etc.
Yeah. Do, do you think on the technology side, because it's changing rapidly, right, and regulation is never going to keep up by the time one regulation goes through, something's probably changed, and you see companies. I mean, like Revolut brought out their Street View. Um, product this week, and so they've kind of forced a hand on fraud. Have you
Tell me
seen
more
that?
about.
Yeah.
No.
So Revolut have got a setting on their banking that if you set certain locations, so you can set your home, your office, and other designated areas, and if you try to send money outside of those locations, um, it will ramp up the kind of
Hmm.
authentication system, and it'll ask you twice. It'll delay an hour so that if your phone does get stolen for any point, then you're protected.
Hmm.
So they've rolled this out. So they've kind of forced a hand and they've put fraud protection into their product. So do you think this could be a stronger angle rather than waiting around for
Yeah. No.
regulations?
No. That's actually really exciting, and I think Monzo perhaps have flirted with something like that, if
Yeah.
even released it. So yeah, I think those are really creative solutions. But having said that, for a specific part of the demography, right?
Mm,
There's vulnerable people. These are highly digital solutions to this
yeah.
stuff as well. There's vulnerable people, and when I think about, um, some of the scams, like the romance scams, etc., you'll do it from your home. So yes, this
Yeah.
is super effective and wonderful for
Mm,
account takeovers, right? Or stolen phones, stolen devices, etc. Um, that is really great, and I'm sure that will do wonders. Kind of, it's not a blanket solution to everything, right? And it doesn't mean that we've come up with a fantastic tool
mm,
and we can go to relax and not think about the other ways of people being scammed and defrauded. Yeah.
mm,
But the really important point, and again, I think this is a really interesting conversation, and I don't have an answer of how to solve it. It's with the vulnerable populations. The
mm,
tools tend to be really, really digital, tend to be really high tech. Um, how do we do it for people maybe, um, who have sight problems,
yeah.
or people who are short of hearing, etc. For people
Mm,
that don't have a smartphone,
yeah.
all of these things are really important.
Yeah, because you mentioned Monzo. Monzo have got the notification that if you're on the banking app while you're on the phone, it'll trigger saying we will never ring you. Is this a scam or whatnot? So the products that are being developed, I think, if they can keep expanding fraud as a product and kind of introduce it into design, because the person is the weak point at the moment, right? And there's a lot of people that vulnerable people or even not vulnerable people, anyone can be hit by fraud. But I think that the technology are trying to ramp up, and not just behind the scenes, the transaction monitoring, and all these aspects that people don't see. They're kind of being, it's like a being protected without knowing, being shielded. And then you've got the technology that's front and center that
Mhm.
are protecting as well. So I do think that technology is doing its bit, because regulatory is not quite as fast,
Yeah.
and it can protect people quicker. And well, the collaboration I think is a good thing. We've spoke about it across industries as well. I know we've spoken previously about internally as well. So it being siloed across businesses has been an issue. What's your take on Framel? Are you for it? Are you against it?
Yeah, you know what? I don't really understand why people have that much beef with the aviation itself.
Yeah.
So I understand that we cannot blend those two things together and
Mhm.
just claim that it's the same problem. It's not. There's different ways to solve it, but I think it's absolutely necessary that the collaboration exists, that
Mhm.
we're cross-pollinating the data sets, the learnings from one layer, be it fraud, and the second layer being AML or suspicious activity monitoring. So I definitely put all my hands up for collaboration, whether we call it FRAML or not. I don't really have an issue with the abbreviation.
Mhm.
Actually quite useful.
Yeah.
But I do also acknowledge fully that there's different things at play. The really interesting kind of bridge between those two things that has been so prominent with the reimbursement regulation
Mm.
is the inbound fraud, right? Because the kind of tools we need to solve it are more traditionally sitting in the fraud, because we ideally would be preventing those inbound payments
Yeah.
before essentially processing and accepting them. But the analysis itself sits more squarely in the AML because it's dirty money coming in,
Yeah.
right? So that's where I think the forced almost collaboration across some institutions that didn't used to do it before has happened. And I think, even if you have different vendors, excuse me, some of them, one vendor focusing on your fraud controls and one vendor focusing on your AML, if you don't have those tools speaking to each other, there's really,
Mm.
really valuable intel you can get from one for the other. So I'm all for it.
Does
And
it?
forgive me to those who feel really strongly about the abbreviation. I don't have an opinion.
No, I mean it's not just within the financial crime domain either, because we're starting to see it bleed into. We spoke about data earlier. That hey, how marketing and client onboarding and client acquisition, customer acquisition can play a big part as well, right? And that
Yeah,
internal convergence, if you like.
absolutely, absolutely. I'll say something maybe a bit more controversial, and I'm
Please.
super aware of the difficulties of this, but it's the credit data as well, right?
Mm.
We need to use it really safely and responsibly. It's not that, obviously you don't want to create biases and discrimination against people with lower credit ratings, etc. But it can be telling about how likely are you to be a potential victim again
Mm.
of fraud. Also, of course, it can be telling about if you're using a range of services and you're just trying to max out on everything. Those indicators can be really important if you use them safely and
Yeah.
responsibly in a context of a wide variety of other signals, of course, not a
Mm.
singular risk kind of determinative or
Yeah.
risk factors. So yeah, marketing as well, of course, the activity that you do collect about your customer, we're probably spending the most on the marketing intel, right? And on
Mhm.
those data points. So why not go through it and see if there is valuable indicators?
Where they come from, if like there's so much of a story to tell, because fraud detection effectively is taking a picture in milliseconds,
Mhm.
scanning it, and the more information you have, the better. I think AML's got a bit more time, haven't they? They're a bit more
Mhm.
reporting, looking backwards. But yeah, transaction monitoring is quite close to your heart, of course. So if you had an ideal world, what data would you want? What would you want to have access to? What would really help that domain, that area?
Oh, a big question. So can I name things?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, please do.
Obviously, this is not a product pitch, but what I am really excited about is our collaboration with Experian, for example, in
Mhm.
the market. Um, with the bureau data about the use of different financial products, be it current account, being credit products, etc., and with the access to the membership information about fraud flags, be it onboarding fraud, application,
Mhm.
fraud, so on, or even reports of further kind of transactions or payments fraud. You know, that kind of data is super important, especially in the context to get to answer your question of understanding more about the external counterparties. Because I think we are already collecting, in general,
Yeah.
a lot of quite rich data sets about our own customers, right?
Mhm.
Their history, their consequent expected behavior, the kind of turnovers on their accounts, even the marketing, the credit data, etc., that we touched upon, the
Mhm.
device and session intelligence. But we often have absolutely no clue other than this is the IBAN, this is the account number sort code, and this is the name of that counterparty whom they're sending money to. And what we can do, of course, is collect fraudulent phone numbers and fraudulent emails and
Yeah.
do a screening of are these people on the list or are these entities on the list, yes or no.
Mm.
But it's got issues of its own, right? Fraud that we talked about. I'm not going to say the use SIM card. We often see a really, really quick turnover of those because it's
Yeah.
so easy. And then you know what happens? I used to have a gift gap number when I lived in the UK.
Yeah.
I didn't use it and they just cancelled it. And now it's recycled and somebody else is using it, right? And if I had been a fraudster before, I ended up on one of these block lists
Yeah.
and I just stopped using the number because I'm recycling them
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
using a new one. Then a fully innocent person got given this number. I don't know how long after. I don't know what the kind of pause is before
Yeah.
they start recycling that number. And so those are the issues of just collecting, watch lists essentially of
Mm.
and addresses and company or entity names, phone numbers, emails, etc. So the really, really important kind of dream data set allows you to understand more about the counterparty.
Mm.
Do they have legitimate activity in the market, in the financial market? Do they have mortgages and saving accounts, or are they maxed out of 17 different credit cards? Are they using the similar contact details, be it names, addresses, etc., to open up different lines of credit elsewhere or accounts in different institutions? Getting more context about who the external counterparty is and what that means for the risk of this particular transaction at hand. And of course, we can extend that further into the telco intel and so on. But that's the goal, right? The visibility into the context here.
Yeah, so what does that mean once you've got all that context?
Yeah, I'm going to simplify it grossly because, in the end, it means we're collecting thousands of data points that we feed into really sophisticated models. We engineer the features out of them, the kind of derivative features, cumulative features, etc., trying to combine those data points and see which ones have been determinative or really telling and valuable in assessing previously reported fraud. So, retrospectively testing these hypotheses and plugging these data points in. But what it can tell you, for example, is that, and maybe let me take a step back. A lot of legitimate transactions look exactly the same as the fraudulent and vice versa, right? So the two people sending the exact same transaction for an Oasis ticket that I marketplace, the transactions will look exactly the same. I have exactly the same visibility of the external counterparty in the kind of standard context. And therefore, how is my fraud solution meant to perform well? Am I meant to not create friction for the legitimate customers? How am I meant to protect my consumers or customers who are about to be evicted? So extending that visibility into the external counterparty can tell me this person has a single current account, they have another savings account, they have a mortgage, and maybe they have a savings for their kids. It instantly kind of lowers the suspicion, riskiness of the transaction because this person is demonstrating completely legitimate activity.
Yeah.
And maybe it's unlikely that they just decided out of the blue to start scamming people. Or from the other side of the spectrum, if you see a really wide portfolio of financial products that they're using, and maybe sometimes there's differences in the registration addresses, etc. Maybe they're a director of a company that's gone bankrupt. All of these things that you're able to see, collect, be it company's house, be it the bureau data, be it the national hunter. It's called the membership where institutions can report application fraud. See that this person or this entity has been flagged and reported as fraudulent in the past. That instantly spikes the riskiness of that particular transaction at hand.
Yeah.
Well, you have more visibility into who this counterparty is. What is their history? Do they have anything that is a mitigating circumstance, or to that, do they have anything that suggests there's something dodgy going on?
And what's the challenges? I mean, it sounds like this is the perfect solution, right? Why are we not doing it? Why is it not being implemented tomorrow?
So people ask me, and I'm like, we're trying. Bring it to the market in April of 2026 should be. So the partnership was forged in the summer. And obviously there's a lot to be done in terms of architecture because we're doing this in real time, right? And in terms of informational security, because it's not just us as a vendor or as a fraud control system getting access suddenly to the UK data. It's not like that. It's very tactical. It's all driven by particular transactions, particular suspicions, and particular entity indicators or identifiers, I should say. So it's always on a very specific basis and justified in the context of obviously expected privacy and security of information. So there's a lot to be developed architecturally, IT and security wise. And we're really hoping that it does take off, that when we productize and go to market in April, we are able to provide better detections, more context, and really importantly, more explainability as well, right? Because there's the second part, and I think I sound like a broken record on this. if anybody's listening and we've had this conversation before, I apologize, but I will die on this hill. You can have the absolutely perfect 100% accurate detection system. If you're not able to explain to the potential victim that they're being scammed and convince them that indeed they shouldn't be sending this transaction, then your super trooper detection engine is absolutely useless in the end.
Yeah. And how are we explaining? Because the consumers aren't technical experts, right?
Yeah.
We can't just say, hey, the ML risk score due to these inputs is 1, for example, and they're just like, well, look, well, that doesn't mean anything to me. So how are we communicating that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'm not in a position that, is
Yeah.
the one driving that or handling those kind of conversations. But I've had these discussions with different people. And I think, interestingly, each institution is doing it slightly differently. But I think the convergent point is about storytelling and a bit of human empathy as well.
Yeah.
What is really important as well is balancing the explainability and the transparency you give to that customer with I'm just tipping off people on how to bypass these systems, right? So you
Yeah.
want to do that either. But if you are speaking to a victim or you're suspecting somebody's about to be defrauded because of this scam, it's really about telling them, I've seen XYZ other issues or other occasions on which this particular account that you want to send this to defrauded people just like you. And it's really about that story and snipping them out of it. I'm not the only one that Brad Pitt has fallen in love with, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just to simplify it, really. But it's then the job of your customer service, right? To understand, have that empathy, be able to navigate the different scenarios as well, and not lose trust. Because if you don't create that trust, if you don't convince that customer, they will send it. And if your
Yeah.
keeps on blocking it, they'll go elsewhere. And you're just pushing people into a different space where you lose the controls completely, right?
Yeah. Do you think this is why the human will always be in in the loop because of the empathy and the storytelling?
I'd like to think so. Like, mark my words, it's 2025, December. Really don't see, I do see the enormous potential of AI, automation, anti-co-pilots, etc., that help us with investigations, help us sift through the noise. But I don't think we want to remove the human from the loop in this particular category of activities, be it, fin crime management. I think the goal of technology should be to empower the humans to do what they're best at. That's empathy, explaining that to the potential victims. That's investigations, detective work, kind of connecting the dots. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, to be controversial, does it scare you that maybe AI could do it better? I mean, if we had access to increasing amounts of data and there's more knowledge sharing and the models get better, that they can detect things much easier, they can understand human empathy, and they can then pass that message digitally onto the user. Does that scare the industry, or because there'll always be in the strategic positions, the architecture positions, putting these solutions together, there always needs to be human, but the actual execution, could it be that it's done better by AI?
Yeah, I think we need to really, take a holistic picture of the life cycle of the transaction or of the controls or the really. And I think there's strategic points at which the AI or technology, we don't need to
Yeah.
call it AI, it doesn't matter really, is better placed. And that's going through thousands of data points in 100 milliseconds
Yeah.
and telling me what I need to know. But at the point of, for example, the trust and the convincing of the victim that they really should be cautious and not send this money. I don't know about you, but I've grown almost immune to pop-ups and anything a machine spits at me, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm really convinced and I've already taken the steps that lead to me sending a large transaction somewhere, I'm not going to be convinced otherwise by a robot. And I think almost we need to have that, empathy. We talked about that, the trust, the almost surprise. We need to really snap people out of it by a shock of information, right? That tells them there's been exactly, 5 other people exactly like you and they've lost this much money. And a technology or a robot could do that, but I don't think it has that connection. And I've personally grown immune to a lot of these things. So there's different points of the life cycle of the transaction of the fin crime controls where I think the human is really indispensable. And also we do need to keep these things in check, right? We need to question the biases we're building in. We need to question the detections that are coming out of our systems and what that means. What is the impact on our businesses, on the friction we're creating for our customers, on the evolution of fraud? Are
Yeah.
we pushing everybody to unregulated, areas that also keep on growing, right?
Mm.
Um, yeah, what is it doing to consumer faith in the financial systems and to the stability overall of the
Yeah.
ecosystem? So yeah, I think humans indispensable, but there's also there's no possibility we can't avoid leaning into the innovation and really understanding where the bits that the technology can do better.
Mm. Is there any areas in particular that you're excited about when it comes to the technology side of fraud detection?
Hmm. It's too on the nose, but obviously it's just the ability to get the context out of the vast amounts of data.
Mm.
Yeah, and I tried to quickly think about something more surprising or controversial, but that's really it, right? The more data we collect, the more context we can get out of it.
Mm.
And I always say, if I had an endless amount of time, a gigantic notice board, and colorful threads, I can do the detective work, but with the speed of things, instant payments,
Mm.
and the expectations from consumers for a completely smooth experience, we don't have the notice board opportunity. So that's the most exciting thing, I think. We don't need to have completely coded rules if then look,
Mm.
at these kind of manually maintained scenarios of thresholds and conditions. We can do a much more advanced analysis, anomaly detections, um, relational kind of assessment of what everybody else is
Yeah.
doing, segmented analysis, etc. And we can do it really in less than, the F1
Yeah.
kind of qualifying differences. So that's pretty exciting, I think.
And what about the other side? What do you think's been overhyped? What do you not think could be under deliver when it comes to the fraud space at the minute?
So I think, and I only realized that recently,
Hmm.
when we go to conferences or events and we start talking about AI in fraud or on money laundering, and I go on about, what we've just been discussing, we're not talking about the same things with a lot of people. And I
No.
think the immediate assumption is that this is the chat GPTs or, agentic or generative AI. And it's mainly people still tend to be assuming we're talking about large language models that learn patterns that allow you to do it quicker. And it's not that, right? We always say that AI is as broad as kind of mechanical engineering. Like on its own, it doesn't really mean anything. Or it does, but it's a really, really vast meaning that
Yeah.
can cover a lot of different things. So I kind of think we can just do analysis on steroids, to put it simply,
Mm.
right? The overhype, I think, is not necessarily an overhype. I think there's a gigantic potential, but I think we need to not just get married to the idea that building co-pilots and agentic workflows will
Mm.
save our lives, and that's the whole of the innovation that we need to be doing, right? If we're feeding rubbish into really highly optimized workflows, the really highly optimized workflows will not help me
Yeah.
with the initial root cause. So they will make me create patterns that deal with rubbish quicker, but that's not what we need to do. So that's a symptom of rubbish analysis. And that is really deep down, it's about not doing enough with your data or not getting the most out of your
Mm.
data. So yeah, I think not necessarily overhype, but over reliance perhaps of our
Hmm.
hopes
Yeah.
on that side of AI and the fact that it will deal with false positives and the recall, i.e., not catching enough of financial crime. I think we need to move further
Mm.
up or down the stream, I suppose, to the root cause of things. Are we doing enough with our data? Are we using advanced enough analytics to have better quality detections that my super optimized workflow can then help me with?
Sounds like you maybe suggest that we've already got the tools that we need. It's just the fact that data we haven't got enough of it circling back again, I guess, we haven't got enough data and we haven't got clean enough data to solve with the tools that we have now. And we're just hoping that the tools further down the line will solve the problems we have now. But it's just the same foundational issues that we have and always had.
Possibly, really. But I don't even think it's about enough data or enough data of sufficient quality. I think it's
Hmm.
about the next step, and that's, are we using the right tools to analyze out of it? Um, and I think that's where we should focus now, and that's where perhaps we struggle. And a part of that, going back to what we discussed earlier on, it's the regulation that in many jurisdictions still prescribes you need to have these rules and scenarios.
Hmm.
And that doesn't really allow us to get the most out of the data often, because those
Hmm.
haven't changed for 30 years. Um, and you can't just keep on adding to them, right? Because we need to be able to do this in line with our business and in line with the grow. We can't just keep on investing into analyst teams and grow those groups of people that will sit down and investigate false positives
Hmm.
because somebody's prescribed that we need to keep these rules forever. So if you go to an MLRO or a fraud manager and you tell them, I'll help you catch more, they won't be too excited. They might be initially, but then they're like, okay, but something else needs to give, right? And just keep on adding more of risk coverage, etc. If you don't also cut on some of the false positives.
Hmm.
So it's not the data. I think we have plenty of data. It's using it effectively, and it's using the right tools that allow us to get the most out of it and really harness the
Hmm.
context, because context is king,
Yeah.
out of the data we already have, even if it's low quality. And really importantly, and I know I'm kind of going off on tangents, but really importantly, if you are using the right analytical tools,
Hmm.
it also gives you a bit of a, or shows you a bit of a mirror to where the data quality can be better, to where perhaps you have gaps in data collection, where another
Yeah.
feature, another data point could be useful and improve your outcomes. So it's a really good retrospective tool as well to say, taking a step back, what can we improve on this front and the data
Hmm.
collection?
Yeah. So time's flown. So final question: whose responsibility is this? Who needs to grab the bull by the horns and make sure we are doing this?
No, I think I'm going through a tunnel. So collective,
Yeah.
right? Collective. You've seen the conversation around the reimbursement, both in
Hmm.
the UK and with PSD3
Yeah.
plans in the EU. Financial institutions were not ecstatic about it, and
Why would they?
yeah, one side of the kind of, I don't want to say spectrum, but the claim
Hmm.
is we're paying for consumer stupidity almost, would some
Yeah.
say, or we're allowing consumers to be reckless with their money because there's this backstop,
Hmm.
safety net. At the same time, I do think financial institutions do bear a vast portion of that responsibility, because
Yeah.
we're the ones, or not a financial institution, they're the ones who can actually block those payments, but they need help, right? They can't do it on their own. And that's when we mentioned telco, social media, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
There
Hmm.
needs to be responsibility for who's able to advertise their investments,
Yeah.
scams, etc. Their Bitcoin investment that's too good to be true. So collective responsibility for sure, and the consumers themselves as well.
Yeah, education and the bit of responsibility on the end user as well. Absolutely. Finishing up, predictions for next year. We've spoke about telco, spoke about social media. There's going to be a big emphasis on them. What else do you see?
It really feels from our, again, conferences, events, conversations we've been having, that we're kind of on the brink of perhaps really setting up meaningful collaboration and data.
Mm.
We've been discussing this for decades, right, as
Yeah.
industry. And it kind of feels like we're about to maybe have a
Oh,
breakthrough.
okay.
So I'm hoping, kind of wishful thinking, projecting that
Yeah.
that's on the roadmap for 2026.
Just crossed. Manifest. We'll manifest it, and
Exactly.
it will come true. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Lucy. Thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully, you had good fun too.
Absolutely, Matt. We'll love to talk about fraud on any Friday afternoon. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. And thanks for wonderful questions.
Thank you. And to listeners, until next time. Ciao for now.
Have a good one.